Good afternoon. Thank you, TEDx, for inviting me, which is a big surprise, especially for my family. Anyway, what I would love to discuss is why do we have so many crises? In fact, if we look at the last couple of years, crisis after crisis. And it's interesting, because very often you say, the pace of change has never been as big as in the past. Yeah, bloody nonsense. I hear that already for 50 years. Let me quote what has changed, and that's the experience of diversity. There's a German philosopher, Sloterdijk, very Dutch name, who said, we had a long time that we lived in ethnic cages. And the lids are off, and we're all mixing through internet, travel, and what have you. Look at Amsterdam, a city where diversity is all over the map. And our models, our paradigms in which we picture the world are still culturally biased. That's true for leadership. The American interesting viewpoints don't even work in America. We have models like politics that are very culturally biased. And I would like to discuss with you, is there an alternative? Because once we have culturally diverse teams, we need other ways to approach them. And that needs some kind of a culture shock, and it's not easy. How did I come interested in this field? I have, sorry for that, but I have a French mother and a Dutch father, which doesn't make you Belgian. There are limits of what you can take. By the way, last summer we celebrated their 63rd anniversary. 63 years together, yeah. And you see the product. Anyway, the rumor in the family is they're still together happily because they never understood each other. Yeah? So there is hope. Now, it's wonderful to be raised in a multicultural family. And for those who know France a bit, especially for the Dutch, quite different from the Dutch. I remember around summertime, about 3 months, we were dumped into Paris with our grandparents. And when our parents were still there, they were chatting. And we were chatting as well. And it was my grandmother saying, taisez-vous, which means shut up. Why? If the grandparents are talking to the parents, the children shut up. Same in Amsterdam, shut up. But it was the grandchildren to the grandparents, right? The French are educated to respect authority, which, for example, comes with age and education. And we in the Netherlands, even a policeman, we take off the cap and say, who are you? Yeah. Now, this is quite interesting because there was a time the Americans were in America, the Chinese were in China, and thank God the French were in France. And then these local type of management theories did work amongst the Americans, amongst the French, and amongst the Chinese. But now we get multicultural teams, and what do we need to do? Let me give you an example, and that gave me quite deep insights when I was doing some work as a professional in Tokyo. We were invited by a small little bank called HSBC, and we were trying to discuss with them, because Americans were quite dominant in Asia, to explain that the Asians had to become more objective, otherwise they might cause a financial crisis. As you know, Americans are consultants in avoiding financial crises. And as you know what the Japanese say if they don't understand it, they say hi, 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 which means I don't understand. So the Americans explained it again, more objective, but louder. And after the third time, the Japanese found out they didn't have a word for objectivity. So they borrowed a word from the Chinese and called it kyakanteki, which literally means the outsider or guest point of view. And for the cynical Japanese, the American point of view, that's objective. Then you have kyakanteki, which is a wonderful world that says, gee, its subjectivity is the host point of view. Now, if we want to avoid companies looking like this, and this is what we get if we don't connect viewpoints, and you know those companies, we have plenty of them. Sorry if your organization is not there. Yeah? Yeah. I had 3 more logos, but there were the 3 sponsors of this event. I had to take them off. Yeah, I'm sorry. Anyway, there are limits to what we can do. Anyway, They said, gee, this is perhaps the basic idea of what we call a dilemma. The outsider's viewpoint, kanteki, and the insider's viewpoint or subjectivity, shukanteki. And what we want to do with you in this talk is, can we create, and that's what we did with HSBC, a Japanese garden. A Japanese garden is an invitation to connect viewpoints. And if you connect outsiders and insiders' viewpoint, you get a better picture of reality. Now, I would like to do this with HSBC advertising campaign. A different point of view is simply the view from a place where you're not. Connecting viewpoints. And I was surprised, after Tokyo, 3 months later, I land on Heathrow, and I see the new advertising campaign of HSBC. You remember? Work, play, work, okay? And you remember those advertising? It's too bad that we don't have HSBC advertising campaign so heavily. But this is what we need to do to create a paradigm that helps us across cultures. Now, let's practice this a couple of times. For those who know our work, we very often ask this question, and we have asked it to 100,000 people now. After I did some research, this was in the late 70s, early 80s, with Shell. We compared 10 refineries, and this was one of the questions we asked to 6,000 Shell people. We said, you're riding in a car driven by a close friend of yours. Your friend is going 50 miles an hour where you're allowed to go 30, and he hits a pedestrian. You come to court, and the lawyer of your friend says, don't worry, you're the only witness. 2 questions. First of all, what is the right of your friend to expect you to testify to the lower figure, to lie for you as a friend? My friend, A, has a definite right, B, some right, C, no right. Now, before I engage you in a little discussion, who would like to be in this situation? I've never had an individual, and I do this work quite all over the globe, that said, nice situation to be in. Yeah? 10 years ago, we had a participant who didn't understand the question. Yeah. So we stopped all our workshops in the White House. Now, I hope the NSA hears a beep, yeah? Anyway, why don't we like to be in this situation? Can I guess? Regardless where you're from, male, female, young, old, Dutch or not Dutch, this is a dilemma, okay? And the beauty of respecting cultural differences is to know we all share the same dilemmas. There is no culture that doesn't want to help friends, and there is no culture that doesn't have something with the truth. But now let's get a bit further and say, would you lie for your friend? Second question. And I would like to ask you, for those who say yes, I would lie for my friend, would you like to stand up, please? And those that don't, you stay seated. And please confirm my statistics. Thank you. There are some people standing up, great and courageous. Because, be careful, this is videotaped, huh? Thank you. I guess it's about 70% no, and 30% yes, and perhaps 1% can't stand up. Now, it's interesting. See what happens with the second question. The dilemma is human, and it's our culture that forces us in some direction. And amongst Americans, have a look, you might see quite different scores than in Venezuela. So you see the top score, Switzerland, 97% said, my friend has no right or some right, and I will not help by lying. And as you know, 3% in Switzerland speak Italian. Yeah, Italy is not on the chart because PowerPoint can't deal with negative scores, right? Now, the risk if I would stop here is people at the top would say, the Protestants, they're all Protestant because they've seen the light, they know what is good is for the world, right? And they will say, thank you, Mr. Trompenaars, I knew the Russians and Venezuelans are corrupt. You proved it. You can't really trust them because they always help their friends. Till I did a workshop in Korea, and the Korean said, Mr. Trompenaars, thank you, I knew the Americans are corrupt, and you proved it. I said, what do you mean? You can't trust them, they won't even help their friends. Yeah? Now, what am I doing with you? What is your laughter about? Both logics are logical. And I learned from John Cleese that if you connect two opposing logics that both turn logical, it's another word for humor. Humor is making two opposing logics logical. And that's why laughter is so important in cultural diversity, okay? Now, companies say, yeah, but all this stuff with corrupt people and less corrupt people, you know what we need to do as companies? We need to create values that we share worldwide. And if I look at values of a company, I know exactly their problems, right? Now, I have 3 daughters. That's why I'm traveling so much. And we obviously are a modern family, so we have our values on top of our door, and the latest one is we don't kill men here. Yeah? It's one of our values, but it makes our guests nervous, right? So what do I do if you have the dilemma of we need a standard to be uniform, or cultures that says it depends? Uniformity is the Swiss, the Americans, the Protestants. We have a standard and go for it. It depends is the French, what happened to the pedestrian? Or the best question I ever had, an Italian asking what happened to the car? Because my answer will depend, right? Now, what we need to do, obviously, is select values that help us to solve this dilemma. And integrity is a beautiful one. So I was with a big financial institution in America, and obviously, as their first value, they had integrity, because they didn't have a clue of what it was. And I was with their top 80, and an American, because I was asking, how does integrity help you to give the correct answer to the car accident dilemma? And the American stood up and said, John was his name, Fons, I could follow you so far, but now I give up. How can integrity be different than my friend not expecting me to lie and me not lie? And I didn't want this, but fortunately enough, there was a Korean who said, sorry, John, I disagree. How can integrity be different than me helping my friend? And the fun was everybody in the room understood both, because it was a dilemma making you human. It's your culture that kills half of you. And it's not good enough in the world we're living. Say, yeah, but if we have different interpretations of what is integrity, let's go back to the etymological root of the word integrity. Creating wholeness through the integration of opposites. So how do you do this? Is it the law or my friend? And see what happens. Crack the line. The dilemma is horizontal, you crack the line. It's an invitation to connect. And let's see what we did in Japan, because this is the Japanese answer, the Japanese garden. Why don't we invite the friend to tell the truth himself, so we can talk to the judge to lower the sentence for his courage, right? And in America, you say, no, we will tell the truth, but we'll visit our friend frequently in jail, right? There are different ways, the clockwise and the anti-clockwise helix. Let's practice this with my favorite cultural diverse model by Kurt Lewin. Kurt Lewin was a German psychologist who went to America. He said, how come Americans are so upfront with their information? You hardly know them and they talk about their cholesterol levels. And it's kind of interesting because he said, Americans are like peaches with a lot of accessible flesh, but with a tough nut in the center. And we Germans are like coconuts, and as you see, we don't shave each other, right? Now, let's take the American model. When I went to America, I lived a couple of years in Philadelphia. The first thing they do when you invite people is they're in your refrigerator. It's very public. But for most Europeans, it's not what you do. What the hell are you doing in my refrigerator, right? And then we didn't have a car. Typically Dutch, you borrow one. In America, you need my car. Here's my car. Have you tried this in Germany? Are you kidding? No way, he's my wife, but leave my car, okay? Now, according to Lewin, this leads to a specific relationship. If I relate to you, you relate to me, cut the crap, what is this about? Even titles. When I got my PhD in the faculty club, this is Dr. Trompenaars. With the same people, they introduced me as, this is Fons. Why? You have a label that needs to be relevant in a specific situation. Doctor in the university, Fons at the barbecue. In Germany, at least, and it's wonderful in Germany, you're hair doctor everywhere. You're hair doctor in academia, you're still hair doctor at work. You buy a steak at the butcher, good Abend, hair doctor. You come home, good Abend, Frau doctor. Where are the little doctors? Everything is doctor, because you are doctor. Now, how do you recognize the coconut culture? Initially, no relationship. But around October, Munich, this happens, yeah? Everything merges. Now, the biggest problems in diverse cultures is how does the peach meet the coconut? The danger zone. Let me give you one example. Brainstorming. In America, you have an idea, put it on the table, chunked into pieces, no problem, next brain. You go to Germany, and this is what we had in AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, is, yeah, wait a second, This is my brain, I don't put it on the table. So what is the reconciliation? The Germans were taken separate. They did internal brainstorming, and the best English speaker with, on the other side, the best English speaker, which obviously amongst the Americans was difficult to find, they exchanged their ideas, and the idea was depersonalized. And the first gigahertz chip was made in AMD Dresden because of this little intervention. Now, a manifestation of this is, do we go high-tech, specific, or high-touch, diffuse? If you go high-tech, you see the electronic hook. If you go high-touch, it is a personal relationship. What do you see? Amazon is building shops, so high-tech companies will say we need face-to-face, and shops say we need high-tech. And that's called a reconciliation, where you use the internet to deepen the relationship, and where you take human relationships to make the use of internet more effectively. Now, privately, I had an enormous problem. And why? I was traveling, and I still am, about 100 days a year. And say, can I not apply this to my own situation? Although I think we're still around because I travel so much. But it's kind of interesting because, to be honest, there are solutions. So what we did, and today is the first day we launch it, over the last 3 years we developed an app. And the app pictures exactly, after some wonderful introductions, a questionnaire which gives you your profile and the profile of a country of interest, like here Argentina. You click on the dimension and you get an explanation of what your score compared to Argentina means in terms of doing business. And if you say, cut the crap, I want some tips, here are some tips. And if you say, but the tip is very shallow, you click on the tip and you go one level deeper. Wait till the app will meet your smartphone. It will make a huge difference because it not only shows the differences, it shows what you can do and the dilemmas it creates with other cultures and tips how to reconcile those dilemmas. Let's go to leadership. Models are culturally biased. In America, it's all about competence. In France, it's all about, did you go to the École Polytechnique? Are you male and from Paris, grand patron? And in Chinese, it's all about yin, yang, mao, fao, tao. Now, what do we do with diverse groups? We connect viewpoints. And that's what HSBC, are you a leader or a follower? Because if you only go bottom up, or if you only go top down, you have a problem. Bottom up literally means the Dutch model, lost democratic leadership. Okay? It is the polder model, and nobody dares to take a decision. You have the Arab Spring, follow the leader and nobody's listening, you all drop down the cliff. And can I go back to the introduction of this morning? Mandela, a beautiful example of the servant leader. He gets authority by serving other people. I come to a summary. How can we connect Gyakanteki and Shukanteki? Have a look. What is this? If you just know that if you look at the bridge from the top, you get the top. If you look from the side, you get the side. But if you combine the two, you get a picture that makes it very clear that reality in diverse groups needs to combine opposites into a higher reality. I hope you will do this very soon. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.